For over 3 decades, the killing of Christine Jessup was one of Canada's most heartbreaking and notorious cold cases. In 1984, 9-year-old Christine disappeared from her home in Queensville, Ontario. She had been waiting for her parents to return home that afternoon, but vanished without a trace. 3 months later, her body was discovered in a rural field about 50 kilometers away. She had been sexually assaulted and murdered. The small community was shattered, and a relentless search for justice began. At first, the investigation focused on Christine's neighbor, Guy Paul Morin, who was arrested and later convicted of her murder. However, his conviction was overturned in 1995 when DNA evidence excluded him as the killer. Morin's wrongful conviction highlighted critical flaws in the justice system, but it also left the Jessup family with no answers about who had taken their daughter. For years, the case remained cold, despite ongoing efforts to identify the real killer. It wasn't until 2020, 36 years after Christine's death, that a major breakthrough occurred. Using advancements in DNA technology and genetic genealogy, investigators identified a match to DNA found on Christine's clothing. The evidence pointed to Calvin Hoover, a man who had been a friend of Christine's family at the time of her murder. Hoover had died by suicide in 2015, but DNA testing confirmed his involvement in the crime. This revelation brought an end to the decades-long search for the truth. Although Hoover could not be brought to justice, his identification provided long-awaited answers for Christine's family and cleared Guy Paul Morin's name once and for all. The resolution of Christine Jessup's case is a testament to the power of perseverance and the advancements in forensic science. It highlights how even after decades, justice can still catch up to those who think they've escaped it. While it doesn't erase the pain of her loss, the identification of her killer brought closure to a case that haunted a family and a nation for over 30 years. For over 4 decades, the murder of Carla Walker remained a haunting cold case, a mystery that gripped the Fort Worth, Texas community. In 1974, 17-year-old Carla Walker was abducted from a parking lot after a Valentine's Day dance with her boyfriend. What began as a night of celebration turned into tragedy. Carla and her boyfriend, Rodney McCoy, were sitting in his car outside a bowling alley when an unknown man attacked them. The assailant struck Rodney with a pistol, knocking him unconscious, and dragged Carla out of the car. She screamed as she was forced into the abductor's vehicle. 3 days later, her body was found in a culvert near Lake Benbrook. She had been sexually assaulted, beaten, and strangled. For decades, police pursued countless leads, but hit dead ends at every turn. The case grew colder with each passing year. Carla's family never gave up hope, but justice seemed out of reach. That is, until advancements in DNA technology breathed new life into the investigation. In 2020, 46 years after the crime, police used genetic genealogy to identify the suspect. DNA from the crime scene was uploaded to a public genealogy database, linking it to Glenn Samuel McCurley, a man who had been questioned early in the investigation but had never been charged. Back then, police had no evidence to tie him to the crime. But now, with his DNA directly matching the sample taken from Carla's clothing, they had the proof they needed. When confronted, McCurley confessed to the murder, bringing an end to the decades-long mystery. In 2021, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison, finally delivering justice for Carla and her family. The murder of Carla Walker stands as a powerful example of how cold cases, no matter how old, can be solved with determination and the power of modern technology. For 46 years, her story remained a painful reminder of justice delayed. But thanks to advancements in forensic science, Carla's family now has the answers they waited nearly half a century to hear. For decades, the Golden State Killer haunted California, leaving a trail of terror and unanswered questions. Between 1974 and 1986, an unidentified assailant committed at least 13 murders, 50 rapes, and over 100 burglaries. Known by names like the East Area Rapist and the original Night Stalker, he vanished without a trace, and his case went cold for over 40 years. But in 2018, everything changed. Investigators turned to a groundbreaking technique, genetic genealogy. Using DNA collected from crime scenes decades earlier, they uploaded the profile to a public genealogy database called GEDmatch. This didn't directly reveal the killer, but it traced his DNA to distant relatives. Through painstaking work, genealogists built a family tree that led to one suspect, Joseph James DeAngelo, a 72-year-old former police officer living a quiet suburban life in Citrus Heights, California. On April 24, 2018, DeAngelo was arrested. His DNA matched the evidence from the crime scenes, finally unmasking the man responsible for decades of fear. When police confronted him, DeAngelo reportedly muttered, "I have a roast in the oven," as if trying to downplay the gravity of the situation. In 2020, DeAngelo confessed to 13 murders and admitted to dozens of rapes and burglaries. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For victims and their families, this moment brought long-awaited closure. The resolution of the Golden State Killer case was a turning point in criminal justice, showcasing the incredible power of genetic genealogy. It proved that no matter how much time passes, justice can still be served. This case not only solved a decades-long mystery but also paved the way for countless other cold cases to find answers. The Golden State Killer may have escaped for over 40 years, but in the end, science and persistence brought him to justice.